Hi, it's Stephen Seiler here. On the 18th of July, I'm really looking forward to presenting my 3-hour live stream hosted by the Physical Performance Show, Sustainable Training for Attainable Endurance Goals. Get your tickets today, and I will see you online.
We are thrilled to be hosting acclaimed sports scientist Dr. Stephen Seiler, forefather of polarized training, on an upcoming 3-hour live stream event in July. Dr. Seiler, during this live stream, will cover 4 key areas around sustainable training for attainable endurance goals: intensity distribution for long-term performance development, interval training, periodization and peaking, training monitoring to support the process, and Q&A time. To register for this live stream, jump over to pogophysio.com.au/Dr. Seiler, and from just $49, you can learn from one of the world's most preeminent sports scientists around all things endurance training. The ticketed price includes post-live stream recording, a workbook, and of course, live Q&A time with Dr. Seiler himself.
Hi, I'm Arild Tveiten, the head coach of the Norwegian Triathlon team, and you're listening to the Physical Performance Show.
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go.
150 meters to go. No one would possibly have thought, with maybe the exception of the man himself and those closest to him, that Kasper Stornes was going to win a WTS race in Bermuda, and he's done it the hard way. 30 kilometers riding solo on the bike. What a victory for Stornes. It's a 1-2-3 for Norway. It's never happened before that any country has swept the board in men's WTS triathlon. It has now. The 3 Scandinavians have ripped the form book apart.
That was a snippet from the 2018 World Triathlon Series Bermuda race, where Norway became the first nation in World Triathlon Series history to clean sweep a podium when Kasper Stornes, Kristian Blummenfelt and Gustav Iden took first, second and third in a historic endurance sporting day. And on today's episode of the Physical Performance Show, you're in for a real treat, as I caught up recently with Triathlon Norway's head coach, Arild Tveiten, to glean from him around all things endurance training learnings on this A Coach's Corner episode of the Physical Performance Show. I'm Brad Beer, sports physiotherapist and exercise scientist by trade and training, and founder of Pogo Physio. Each week, we'll bring you the latest and greatest information and inspiration designed to help you perform at your physical best. Of course, we do this across our episodes, including interest editions, coaches' corners, featured performers, and expert editions. And by way of bio, Arild Tveiten, Triathlon Norway Head Coach, Sports Director of the Norwegian Triathlon Federation, knows the endurance training world and the fundamentals that underpin endurance sporting success. In recent years, as reflected by the clean sweep in 2018 by the Norwegian Triathlon men, Norway has really positioned itself as such a strong force in the world of triathlon and the endurance sporting community. Kristian Blummenfelt, former featured performer of the show, episode 117, in fact, holds the fastest time ever across a 70.3 triathlon with a sweltering 3:29.04 set in 2019. Add to that Kasper Stornes, who took second place in the 2019 Tokyo Olympic test event. And of course, Gustav Iden, Norwegian national team athlete, who took out the 2019 World 70.3 Triathlon Championships. And on today's episode, Arild Tveiten shares around his 3 guiding endurance training principles. And they are why training at high volume is required for endurance sporting success, paying attention to the intensity distribution of that training workload, and recovering well are so key. In addition, Arild shares some great insights around belief and the importance of an athlete believing in themselves, and Arild issues a unique physical challenge for the week around interval training. Here is my conversation with Arild Tveiten, Triathlon Norway Head Coach, on this A Coach's Corner episode. Arild Tveiten, welcome to the Physical Performance Show. It's very exciting to feature another Coach's Corner episode. And as Triathlon Norway Head Coach, Sports Director of the Norwegian Triathlon Federation, looking forward to taking away some of your great teachings and learnings.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on your show. I've been able to listen to a lot of your podcasts during my lately run in this COVID-19 period we have all. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Well, Arild, I mean, as you say, this COVID-19 world, maybe we just start with our current realities and then we'll get the context of your coaching career to date and also your own athletic journey. But COVID-19, we're recording in July 2020, and at this point, we were all expecting that we were just a month or thereabouts out from what would have been the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. So, as the coach, the national head coach, how have you yourself adjusted expectations? And secondly, how have you helped your athletes?
Well, of course, when all this happened, it was a very strange situation, and you took some time before you understood how to deal with it and how seriously it was. I remember actually we were in training camp in Phuket, Thailand, and we were on the flight over to Abu Dhabi race, and I just got a message from one of the person from ITU. He said, this is not official, but you should try to plan for another way back home instead of going to Abu Dhabi. And now we were in a situation, it was almost like when the athletes were on the transfer to the airport, I said to them, when you come to the airport, you know if you go to Abu Dhabi or home. I need to check out the tickets. So within just 1 or 2 hours, we were able to cancel the tickets to Abu Dhabi and book a flight back home to Norway. So it was, and after that, athletes coming home, and so the situation in Norway was not bad, but everything was closing down. So it actually took maybe 1 or 2 weeks to understand how serious it was, how it will affect the season. Obviously, when we heard when the Olympic was postponed, we knew very concrete what we had to do. So then it was okay, maybe we should take it down a little bit, step back on the training, going back more to the off-season kind of training, and then we had a lot of meeting with athletes. Obviously, I was in Oslo. The best athletes was in Bergen, so we could not meet. So we had a lot of Skype meetings to discuss what we should do, try to find some new goals. And very, very early, we found out that this is, in a way, very positive for us, because we still see that our athletes are young athletes under very good development, and we think that 1 more year of training will actually make them better. So we try to put it into a positive perspective. And for me as a coach, it was like, I think maybe it was a little bit tougher for the coaches, because in many ways you live your life in 4-year cycles, and you plan your family time and what you should do according to that. Or sports scientist who is with us a lot of the time, he had planned to, they were expecting a second child, so he was looking forward to kind of 1 year off after the Olympics to spend more time with the family, the new babies. But no, everything is postponed, so he will, of course, at least have 1 more year of tough traveling. But we also turned it into something positive. For me, it was like after a while, I thought, oh, this is just a good opportunity for me, take it a little bit easier. And I was actually in a position that I was start to get not so fit that I used to be. So I start to train daily, sometimes twice a day, and that actually helps a lot. My fitness level is getting better again. I will not say I'm very fit, but it's much better than it used to be, and that also mentally helped. So now we are like the last 2 months, I would say we have been training really well and preparing well. And in Europe, the situation is getting a little bit better, and we can see the light in the tunnel. We see that we have actually planned our first altitude camp within the next 3 weeks. The European Championship is still planned to go in the end of August. So now we can see that it should be possible for us to have a kind of a season. So now we're just looking forward to that.
You mentioned there, Arild, that you were able to add a positive dimension to it. And I think it's worth, for context, mentioning, as you did, that the Norwegian train, referring to the male Norwegian athletes, Kristian Blummenfelt, Kasper Stornes, and also Gustav Iden, they are young in years. So as you say, for some, the extra year may be somewhat of a disadvantage, but for others, like your young chargers, that extra year of development and good training potentially will only hold them in good stead.
Yeah, it is, of course. We say that, and we see that. But of course, we see that we have some really young, talented athletes also coming up. So they will, of course, spend the next year very well too. And then we have maybe some athletes maybe on the border of a little bit of maybe over the top, and can have trouble to improve the next year. So it will be very exciting to see how all these kind of athletes handle this season and leading into the next season.
You mentioned, Arild, your fitness there, and it's certainly been something I've observed from Australia is the shutdowns, the lockdowns, allowing many people to regain some fitness. You have walked a journey with triathlon for 30 years. You were the Nordic junior champion, raced in Denmark in 90. You did your first Ironman in 8:51 at 22 years of age, which, as per a recent Instagram post, you said was to your disappointment that you never eclipsed that. You finished 9:37. There was a great photo that you put up recently on Instagram. 80th in 1997. So you really walk the talk. It's been in your blood for years. You've seen some great changes over that time, right?
Yeah. No. Yes. I actually started doing triathlon in 1987. I was 16 years old, so that was of course long before all of my athletes were even born. So I was there in quite early days, and I have some really good memories. I was not performing exceptionally well, but I've been in the area. I've been able to race with Dave Scott, Mark Allen, Scott Tinley, Jürgen Sack from Germany, who I spent some time with in Thailand. So I've been a part of that former generation and see the development of the sport. You mentioned that I was a Nordic junior champion in 1990. At that time, we raced in the Olympic distance. There was no sprint distance for juniors. It was the Olympic distance. And it's, of course, a non-drafting format. So it was a really different kind of racing. So for me, when we trained, we put a lot of emphasis especially on the bike. And the running was not so important. It was important, but in the earlier days, you can see that some of the best athletes was really strong swimmer bikers, and they would just hold on to a 33, 34 minutes 10K and still could be a European champion and even a world champion. I think I remember Spencer Smith in 93 or something. He was winning the world champion with outstanding performance on the swim bike, and his running was, of course, it was good at that time. It was not like we see today. So the dynamic of the racing has changed a lot. And also for me, in the early days, I did an Ironman. I was 22. In the national team, it was like, okay, you do the Olympics, you do the Ironman, you do whatever you want. You train kind of a way you can handle all of this distance in a way. Many athletes did that. And of course, you were probably not the best in anything, because there's some big changes we saw when we had the specialization, when you had to draft legal format, and you have faster racing, you have the sprint, and you have the super sprint, and then that was a turning point of the sport, actually.
Yeah, all right, gosh, yeah, I remember I got into the sport in 1990 here in Australia as a junior. I was 10 years of age, 10 and 11, and as you say, Arild, there was no drafting. There was so it really did play into the hands of the strong bikers who, as you say, could try and hold on. And ironically enough, those that observe and follow the World Triathlon Series would all recognise that the athletes in the national squad who we've just mentioned, Kristian Blummenfelt, Kasper Stornes, and also Gustav Iden, they are all incredibly strong cyclists. And who can forget the 2018 Bermuda clean sweep, where Norway became the first country to clean sweep a World Triathlon Series podium. Just going back there and preparing for this conversation, Arild, I did watch the race back, and there was that great moment on the last lap where Coach Arild is running along beside Kasper as he goes up the hill for the last corner. Can you just recap your memories of that day? And I guess everyone wants to know what the magic ingredients were in seeing that clean sweep come to fruition.
It was, of course, a fantastic day. I remember a little bit about the preparation, because we were in altitude camp in Sierra Nevada. There's a place where there's a lot of hills, so most of the cycling you do training going uphill. So we know that the bike fitness was always very good were coming out of that camp. And we'll talk about what we could expect of the race dynamics. And we check out the Corkscrew Hill. We find it on the Google map, measure the lengths and the gradient and everything. And we were discussing, maybe this is the point we should try to have an attack. But it's more like, now everyone go in the WTS series are really good thing, short, hard, anaerobic push up a hill. So no way you can get away up the hill. But so we talk a little bit about how to work on going really hard up a hill, going anaerobic, and then go straight down to air position, going at the threshold, at the highest possible threshold you can, and just keep working on the actually little bit downhill session. So we actually kind of had a plan that maybe you can try to have a race like that we will use that kind of the bike skills to our benefit. But it was not in the plan that it was Kasper who was going to take the breakaway first. So when it was not like he tried to get a breakaway, but he just come up the Corkscrew Hill and just he keep holding the pace that he planned to do, and then suddenly no one was there. And then he decided, okay, I just go for it. And at least I have a 1 hour Hall of Fame. He said, I'm just pushing it. But anyways, so that was, of course, just to be as a coach, was really a good memory. One of the things I remember best is actually I was standing in the transition area waiting for the athletes to... I think they was on the 8th or 9th lap on the bike. The 9th, when also Gustav and Kristian had also gone after Kasper, and we saw that the lead they were having was quite big. And then came Chris Gemmell over to me and said, Arild, yes, I have a serious question for you. Okay, we are now in the middle of a race. What's happening? No, do you have a Norwegian flag? What are you talking about? We just have two. And that was actually at the end of the bike. He asked me if I could get hold of a third flag. So they were actually preparing for the clean sweep from the Norwegian on the podium. And that was actually a memory I remember, because that was maybe 40 minutes before the race was ending, and they were asking about it. I thought, then I understand this could actually happen.
Wow.
Yeah, and I also have to say in the end, because we knew that Kasper could maybe fade a little bit on the end, but he should be able to do it. And I remember actually when he had one lap left, his mother called me. And she was screaming, can he do it? Can he do it? And I said, relax, he has full control. He will win. Just slow down, take it easy, enjoy the last 10 minutes of racing. And she was so nervous. I was a little bit nervous too, but I was in many ways quite confident too.
And I believe you just got that third flag back in time, if I'm correct. Did you run and get one?
Yeah, we ran and get one, and we got it in time. And that was actually the mother of Kristian Blummenfelt, who was there, and she was on the grandstand with the Norwegian flag, so I had to go to her and get the flag. And that was actually the flag I also gave to Kasper before he went to the finish line.
What a memory. And whether you're a triathlon fan or not, to see a country clean sweep any elite sporting podium is very special. And Arild, I think contextually, it's easy for people to look at Norway now and to see it as such a successful triathlon nation. However, it hasn't always been that way, correct? It's not like Australia or the USA, a well-statured, long-chronicled, successful endurance community with triathlon. So what do you think have been the top, say, 3 tips to the apparent overnight, in quotations, Norwegian success? What would be the top 3 characteristics of the squad's success?
I was thinking about it, and it's a mix of everything, and it changed a little bit over time. One thing is that is based on my experience when I raced, because I was on a national team, and we were like, oh, the guys from the US or the rest of Europe are so good, we can never beat them, it's impossible for us. And of course, we never beat them. We were not especially good. I think I have 28th position in the world or something, but we were long way after the best one. So when I started coaching, I was saying, don't ever set any limits to yourself or to the athletes. So even for the first day, I said that, okay, the goal for this national team is to build up a strong team who plan to be the best in the world. I mean, going for the best in the world. That is one thing that is really important, that to make them believe that it could happen. But then we have the guiding principle. And after that, I think it's been working quite well, because I'm a kind of a coach to try to be with athletes, to get to know the athletes, also pay attention to the athletes. So I think they trust me in a good way, and they know that I will always be there for them and do everything for them to be at their best. So to pay attention is really important. And then we come to more of the principle in training, and in general, I would say that when I started, it was like, how should we coach these athletes to be the best in the world? And I was, in a way, thinking, if we do and look too much of what other countries do, the best thing we can do is to copy them. We need to do something more than that. And then, of course, that Norway also the Nordic countries have a quite strong endurance background. And I know that Steven Seiler and been on the show a couple of times and talking about some of the training principles many athletes in endurance sports in Norway work with. So look actually into other sports in Norway. How did they did in rowing? How did they did in cross-country skiing? Track and field. In the 80s, we have the best marathoners for a woman in the world. So I try to get a lot of information from them, and from that it comes down to a little bit about, if you want to be at the best, you need to train a lot. If you want to train a lot, you really need to pay attention to the intensity control. And then you need to pay attention how to recover after the hard training. And then that all comes down to good planning. So then we have maybe some of the principle I work after, but it's been a little bit adaptation and changes over time. But in the beginning, it was like you need to believe that you can be at the best.
Wow, the power of belief.
Yeah.
And just in recapping those 3 points, Arild, which this show is all about highs, lows, and learnings, and helping the listener pursue their own physical best performance. And these certainly speak to anyone's situation, whether it's triathlon or running, distance running, or whatever the pursuit. One, belief. You said don't set limits on yourself. It speaks for itself, right? And it's been said that belief in the training and belief in the program is as important as the training itself, right? So there's the belief in self and also the belief in the program. The second thing was, you said, pay attention to what's happening, and that develops a sense of trust between the athlete and the coach. And the third, which I think it'd be great to explore to extract some learnings, training principles. And there's a further 3 sub-points there. Train a lot, pay attention to intensity control, and how to recover. So, Arild, are you okay if we jump in and just explore these sub-themes around training a lot? Can you extrapolate that a little more for the endurance athlete? What does that mean?
Yeah, okay. Train a lot is a quite wide things to say, but I think if you want to succeed in endurance sport, you need to understand that you need to have a quite high volume in what to do. I meet too many athletes who think you can do the shortcuts to say, if I go higher in intensity, I will succeed. I don't need to do the volume, but you need to have a high volume. And we also see that in triathlon, you had 3 different sports. The volume you can have is a little bit higher, especially if you're doing long distance running. Of course, are you running for a marathon? Maybe you can do 200, 220 Ks a week, but that is in hour not so much. So of course you have some limiting factor in some sports, but triathlon, the good thing about triathlon, you have 3 different sports, so you can mix up the training quite a lot. So for our athletes, and if you use the top 3 athletes, they are not training the same volume. But our best athletes, Kristian, who is the one who is also the oldest athletes, and he's also the one who can handle most training, he probably train around 1,300 training hours a year. And we split it down to weekly basis, more like 25 hours a week, including the off-season. If you go into the normal training week, is around 30 hour a week. And a lot of athletes will say that, oh, that's not so much, we can also do that, and we do that. But it is what you do on a consistent base all the time, all year round. I listen to too many athletes who maybe do 30 hours a week, 1 or twice a month, and then they have a lot of weeks when I do 10, 15 hours a week. And when you add it up, the volume is not so high.
Yeah.
So you need to have consistency over time.
So the importance of consistency, and you mentioned fellow, adopted Norwegian sports scientist Stephen Seiler, who has that saying that the machinery of performance is built not through the exceptional one-off workout, but through the daily unremarkable sessions. And I guess that's what you're alluding to there, Arild, about being consistent all year round over time. So what does would you prescribe time off completely, or are your team, always training, keeping stimulus, but, it looks different in the off season? Yeah,
it looked different in the off season. What we normally have is we have 2 weeks where we have no programs, where they are allowed to take a vacation and do what they want in training. Normally they will go out for training 3 or 4 days a week anyway, but that's a low volume. And normally after this kind of 2 weeks, we actually going to the first altitude camp, and you say, wow, that's tough start for the new season, but then we normally start a little bit easy. We do a little bit going in the mountains. We actually have walk for 3, 4, 5 hours in the mountains the first week and do a lot of different kind of trainings. It's not neat that it needs to be swim, bike, and run. In the earlier days, we haven't done in the last year, but the earlier days we at least had one camp in the winter where we did a lot of cross-country skiing to just do a different training. And I myself had done a little bit of roller skiing, and we tested it out with some of the athletes a few years ago, but we don't do that too much now. Especially, but we try to do a little bit different sport in the off season.
And I liked your picture of you roller skiing on Instagram recently. It's certainly not something you'd find in many countries, but of course in Norway.
Yeah, in Norway we do that, and as you know, cross-country skiing is a big sport in Norway. But to be honest, to do cross-country skiing, also do rolling skiing is a really good training for your upper body. And normally when you do it in the summertime, you actually do what you call pole. You're just using your arm and upper body. So it's kind of a training for when the time when we cannot go to the swimming pool. So instead of using stretch cord and stuff like that, to just go cross-country skiing on a roller ski and just working with your upper body strength is really important. And you use kind of the same kind of muscle.
Yeah, wow, interesting. And it was great to hear there, Arild. Or interesting to hear that, you know, there's no structured program, but the athletes sound like they're free to make up their own minds what they do over that 2 weeks. I recall one of your athletes, Kristian Blummenfelt, when I was covering the Super League Triathlon Series in Jersey as the physiotherapist, and many athletes were winding down, looking forward to the break, and Kristian was, I believe, at that point heading up to Sierra Nevada and getting stuck into some training before he raced a 70.3 half Ironman, and later obviously set the fastest time ever, 3:29 across a half Ironman. Arild, the second principle, you said there was pay attention to the intensity distribution. So can you break this down for the everyday athlete through to the elite? It's a big topic, obviously, but what do you mean by pay attention to the intensity distribution of someone's endurance training? Yeah,
in general, I can say that when you train, try to have a high volume. It could easily be too much if you don't have controlling the intensity principles, and it's normally like you train a little too hard on the easy days, and for us is also what you do when you do have the interval days. We are maybe a little bit different from many other doing triathlon, is that for us is the easy days very easy. Use a lot of lactate to see that we are very well below 0.1, no 1.00 in lactate, and then we have the as you said the interval session. Most of the year that is actually controlled session around anaerobic threshold. I know that a lot of athletes like to go hard on that, but for us is to work on building up the aerobic capacity and endurance, and try to be on the optimal limit on what is the anaerobic threshold. So that is two things we pay a lot of attention to, and of course you have a lot of small thing and into that when we can mix it up a little bit. But I would say that the differentiate between these two intensities, some of the biggest thing that we do a lot.
And so it's monitoring the intensity, using a lot of blood lactate testing, which of course is available through your sports science team there, sports scientist. And I heard you share that the athletes might do 1,000 blood lactate tests a year.
Yeah. One of the big costs we have is the lactate testing. So one thing, of course, what we do in the lab to measuring what the threshold is, and what we have the aerobic threshold, we have the anaerobic threshold, and to do all the tests in the lab. But the thing is that we also do it out in the field. So for us, if we have a threshold interval session on the track, each athlete will probably get 3 or 4 blood samples of lactate testing to see that if they are at the right intensity. And for us, that is really important.
The intensity is mainly monitored through blood lactate levels. Training Peaks is a tool that you use. Are you looking at the heart rate data much as well, Arild, or is it mainly the blood lactate to give an indication there of intensity?
Of course, we're looking at a lot of data too. I can say that if you see the history of our athletes and also some of the history on the difference between working with young athletes compared to the best in the world, when we started, the main intensity things we used to control the intensity was heart rate. And we're still using heart rate. But in the beginning, it was the heart rate we used. And then maybe that's not quite normal. You get into power meters. We use that on the bike, of course, but we're also testing out the street sensor for running, quite the last 3 years actually. And on the top of that, on the third thing, when you develop a little bit more, then we are more into lactate testing. So it's not like that everyone doing the same, and it's not like you need to have a lot of lactate testing to be at your best. And it's a kind of a development process also for the athlete.
Yeah, so it's a bit, it's an evolution of your approach and also the developmental years through the senior ranks by the sounds of it, heart rate, power meters, and then obviously blood lactate testing. You mentioned using power data for running.
Yeah.
What for the last 3 years, what have been some of the takeaways there, Arild? How's that helping inform some of your coaching decisions?
No, what we see on the data from power and running, especially at altitude, running at a terrain where it's very rolling or a lot of hills, it's much easier to control the intensity, because if you do a lactate testing during a session, you still have to do 1 or 2 repeat of a session before you take the lactate, and if it's too high in the beginning, you are already in many ways going too hard too early. So then using the power meter, it's been really valuable for athletes. And using that, a lot of other tools do that. You can also look at the frequency, the cadence on the run. And we mix that up together, and we've been doing a little bit work on trying to find the optimal cadence in running for each athlete based on the intensity. So we are looking a little bit into that numbers to do some changes there and adaptation. But mostly it's like when you start running an interval or a training session, to find the right intensity or pace you can do within the first 20-30 seconds is really crucial to have a good training session. And if you are on the track, most good athletes have a quite good feeling of pacing, so they can know the pace. But if you're running in the terrain or a gravel road or whatever, using the power meters is really important. And on that, we also can see that also on the easier runs, you can maybe try to find a more optimal balance in what power you can have during the whole training session. So it's not so much variation.
You mentioned Cadence, the expert edition just prior to your episode. Arild featured Chris Bremer, UK-based running biomechanist, PhD scholar, and one of the topics was cadence.
Yeah.
What sort of range of cadence are you seeing in your athletes? You're seeing obviously a bit of individual variability.
Yeah. Yes, when you are more at the race pace, we try to say 90 or 180. But you see, for instance, Kristian, he's a little bit higher on that. So he's maybe 92, 93 on each leg. So it's more up to 190 overall. Kasper and Gustav is a little bit lower, but they are very close to 90, actually. And we see that when they're at the race pace, that seems to be quite natural for them. But that is been a change during the years. So we see that the cadence is going a little bit higher.
And do you think that's just a natural progression with the speed of the run leg getting quicker, or it's been purposeful to try and increase that?
That is something we actually see when you can tolerate more and more training loads, especially on the run, that normally gradually find the optimal cadence. And we see that when you get better run, the contact time on the ground is a little bit shorter, the strength length is getting longer. And if you want to run faster, that's actually the three main principles you need to work on. You can increase your cadence, you can increase your stride length, but if you increase that too much, that's probably not optimal. So you need to find a balance between that and also, of course, the contact time on the ground. And we see that by just running more and have a big variation in the speed, in the training, over the years, you find what we see that the quite optimal cadence for athletes. And I think the athletes we have today are the top 3 male now is quite optimum for them. So if they want to improve the running, it's more like that. The stride length need to be a little bit longer.
And I mean, they all move beautifully as it is. And if anyone's looking for a good example of triathlon running, then do look at how the Norwegian train. You're listening to Arild Tveiten, Triathlon Norway's head coach, sharing around his top 3 endurance training principles on this, a Coach's Corner episode. Support for today's show comes from Pogo Physio. If you are an endurance athlete frustrated by injury, be it a bone stress injury, tendon-related injury, or joint-related injury, then Pogo Physio's award-winning online telehealth consultations can help. These sessions are delivered week in, week out to runners, triathletes, endurance sports athletes the world over, are 45 minutes in length, cost-effective, and are able to be booked online. To find out more about Pogo Physio's telehealth online consultations, jump over to pogophysio.com.au. Support for today's show also comes from the upcoming Dr. Stephen Seiler 3-hour live stream event, Sustainable Training for Attainable Endurance Goals. At the time of this episode going live, we are just 2 days away from this eagerly anticipated event with acclaimed sports scientist around all things polarized training, Dr. Stephen Seiler. To register for the event, jump over to pogophysio.com.au/Dr. Seiler live stream. For now, let's jump back with Triathlon Norway's head coach, Arild Tveiten, on the top 3 ingredients for endurance sporting success. We're talking about the second principle here of really endurance success, paying attention to the intensity distribution. You mentioned that by doing this, an athlete can absorb more of the required high volume, and also the common pitfall, which I think is well known but not always well practiced, is training too hard on the easy days.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned that the intervals, which I find so interesting, are around the anaerobic threshold as opposed to the higher intensity intervals, which, from an injury minimization perspective, there's a lot to be said for that, particularly with running. The most load-inducing leg of triathlon, Arild, obviously the higher the running speeds, the greater the loads, and the greater the red line the athlete walks in terms of injury. So I find that really interesting, Arild, that the intervals, obviously they get faster across the season, right? But there's an intention there to not overcook them with interval training.
Yeah, the intention is we try to do most of the interval training around the anaerobic threshold. For them, it's around, in Lactate, it's 2.5 to 2.8. So it's not too high stress on the volume, on the body. The volume you can have is quite high. Let's say in running, we are maybe up to 14K. That's around 42 minutes. But then we see, I know that many athletes and coaches say that, but the threshold is too slow to be race-based, and in its middle of intensity is actually nothing. For us, it's very important, and we try to work on develop the anaerobic threshold. And we see that when the boys now doing a normally threshold session, the average pace on the 1,000 meters is maybe 3 or 5 per K. So it's a little bit slower than in race pace, but it's not much. But if you're just going down to 600 or 800 meters intervals, you're very close to race pace in a triathlon. And if you go a little bit want to go faster than race pace, you can go down to 400. So we try to mix up the length on the intervals quite a lot. So I would say that when we're doing our threshold intervals during a period of time, the pace we are working at is from, let's say, that 250 per K up to 310 per K. So you are still a lot of the time in the area that actually is the pace you have in a race. But of course, we do higher intensity workouts too. But I would say that is maybe one of the biggest thing we pay a lot of attention to.
And obviously there's a lot in there, because from the outside looking in, knowing the volume, or not knowing, but getting an idea of the volume, the high volume your squad does complete in training, it intrigues me, the seemingly quite low injury risk. I know one of your charges hurt his toe in an accident in the gym there, Casper, I believe, which was not a training-induced injury. That was playing around at Christmas time injury. But, it seems like there's quite a low injury incident. So I think there's a lot to be said for the approach you're taking there, Arild.
We see that, of course, we have some injuries. But if you're taking our top athletes, I would say that we have no serious injury the last 5 years or something. I would say the last serious injury we had was Kristian stress fracture in 2013, and that was the last big one. And then we have the broken toe for Casper, but that was not training; it was just playing around.
Yeah, and what we must tag that up in the show notes. There's a great video the guys got of that, and you could hear it pop performing a challenging calisthenic movement. And then, Arild, the third principle of endurance success from the head coach of Triathlon Norway is recover well. And I have to say, I'm itching to explore this one with you. One of the things that sticks in my mind as a triathlon endurance fan is watching two of your athletes, Kristian Blummenfelt and Gustav Iden, race very well at the grand final of the 2019 World Triathlon Series Championship in Lausanne. Kristian winning the race. Gustav, I think, may have finished in fourth. Is that correct? Fourth?
Yeah, fourth. Yes, he was fourth.
And then 1 week later, both enter the World 70.3 Triathlon Championships, make the quick trip across the border and complete some training through the week, and away they go. And obviously Gustav Iden takes the title for the world champion, knocking off Alistair Brownlee. So there must be some great stuff you can share around how to help athletes recover well. That, to me, is extraordinary. One of the best things I've seen in triathlon for a long time.
Yes, of course, to race 2 weeks in a row and perform at that level, you need to be in peak shape, of course. But one of the things we actually see, and both Kristian and Gustav is a really good example on that, is Kristian has said that if he performed bad on a training session, and it was because he was not prepared, he's angry at himself. And prepared means that you pay attention to the recovery process. So when he's going to the track and going to have an interval session, he's always thinking, what do I need to recover as fast as possible after the session? So he brings with him the nutrients, the drinks, the energy he need to be ready to start recovery process at once. And when he coming home, of course, take the time to relax, do the stretching, and do all this kind of the small things. And then he start preparing for the new session again. Okay, what much energy do I need to perform well at this session? How much energy do I need to bring with me on the session? And all the thing I do is, how should I be at the best in every training session? And when I normally do 3 training sessions a day, that means that most of the day you're just planning to what should you do to be best prepared. And I think that both Kristian and Gustav is some of the best in the world on that. They pay a lot of attention to these things that many people think, it doesn't matter so much. I'm just exercise a few times a week. It doesn't matter. I need to lose some weight. It doesn't matter if I don't get enough to drink after the session or fill up the energy levels. It doesn't matter. But it does matter on the highest level. I think that is one of the big difference between the best athletes and the one who never will be the best.
Is as you said, paying attention to the recovery and planning the recovery. There's no accidents, and when I speak or we share on this show about recovery, I always come back to former featured expert edition Arild, former head of recovery sciences at the Australian Institute of Sport, Dr. Shona Halson, who I think sums it up so well that athletes are only benefiting from the training that they are recovering from. So it's no good going and banking that great session if it doesn't end up being banked because the recovery is not there. So pay attention to it and plan for it. I mean, it's commonsensical, but not always done.
No, and to add the last thing on that is like one thing, you pay attention to the workout you need to do, but also you pay attention to what recovery process you need to do to have the best outcome of this session.
Pay attention to the workout and the recovery, and it requires discipline. And if I think about the environment you've, from the outside looking in, created, it does seem to be characterized by one of there's an element of fun. I mean, you can follow any of the athletes on social media or their YouTube channels and see that fun's there, but I would say it's characterized by high discipline.
Yeah, in training it's very high discipline, and all the preparation for training is very high discipline, and it's always to be prepared and try to do the best of it. But on the other hand, we are a group that having a lot of fun together and try to we are spending a lot of time together, and if you don't like to be together and able to make jokes and having fun, we will not succeed. So that is also a part of the thing that is really important, and that is also a perspective of some of the athletes, because when you listen to professional athletes, there's a lot of people say, "Oh, this is my job. I do what I need to do to be at my best." And sometimes I don't like to do what I do, but I want to do it. But our athletes is more like they do whatever they want to do most in the world every day. So, of course, when they are at the top level, they, of course, win some prize money and they get media attention and maybe a little bit famous in the country. But in the end, they do whatever they want to do most in the world every day.
Yeah, that's powerful. And Arild, with that drive and determination and doing what they want to do, which is often training and knowing that the work's got to get done, how do you give permission for the athletes, and this extrapolates to the listener of this show, to listen to their body? What would your advice be to athletes in terms of how to listen to their body? We all know it, we've heard it, listen to your body. But how would you educate an athlete to actually truly do that?
Some of the thing is, of course, that we're using the instrument for intensity control and recovery process. But for me, it's like I like to show that I trust the athletes, and they need to be honest to tell me if I'm tired. And if an athlete comes to me and says, today I'm really tired, I don't think I can do the training session. Most of the time, of course, you can say, okay, you can go out and try. And if you see that they cannot do it, we just stop it. Or if the athlete said, today I cannot do it, I have no problem with the athletes I'm working today to say, okay, I trust you. When you say today that I'm too tired, you know your body so well, then we take it down. And it's a trust between the athletes and the coach. And I see that the mentality of our athletes are so high in the training. So if they say to me, I'm tired, I really know that I'm tired. They are not lazy. I'm not afraid to say, okay, then we take it down. And that is a process that the athletes need to trust the coach, because if you have a kind of a relation based on fear, many will not, they cannot ask the coach, can I take it down, because they are afraid of the consequences. Because some coaches can say, oh, then I don't want you in the team, or you are too lazy. But if you have a really strong relation and they trust you and you trust them, I say to them, you know your body best. You are the one who should make a final decision on that. If you say that you cannot do the training session, I trust you, and then we need to find out what we can do to be ready for the next session again.
So you empower the athletes through an environment of high trust, and I think that's a fear many athletes have, is if they are being coached, recreational through to elite, is, you know, what may a coaching team member or a coach think if I don't hit this session out of the park, or I perform sluggishly, or heaven forbid I just don't do the session. Growing up in the 90s, Arild, and you'll probably clearly recall this as well, it would be, you know, if you weren't at a session, you were deemed like you didn't want it, like you were in Australia, we'd say you were soft, you know, and other names, and so you're afraid to miss a session. But I think things have fortunately changed over that 3 decades.
Yeah, I think it's changed a lot, but of course it's a little bit, it's depending on how the athletes are. Of course, when you're on a lower level, you sometimes see some athletes who don't want to do the session, but they could do the session, but they still find excuses not to do the session. But that is an art of coaching, to know the difference and to see the athletes and understand the athletes and to learn how they are as persons. There
can be that type of athlete as well. Often, though, we're talking about highly driven individuals who recreationally pursue a pursuit like distance running or triathlon around work and life, and they're normally not needing a nudge of motivation, are they? They're needing to be given permission to slow down.
Yeah, it's typical.
Arild, you started by referencing the importance of instilling belief in what was a bunch of young athletes 10 years ago who you've seen through to now be genuine Olympic medal contenders come Tokyo 2021. If we just jump in on belief a little more, how would you coach the athlete that is lacking in their belief, in their self-belief? I know it's an open question, but you know, put your coach's hat on, and how do you help them believe in themselves?
I think it's a very open question, and what I try to do is be very clear that to show that I believe in them and I want to help them to achieve their goals. And if you are able to get that working in a good way, I very often see changes because when you show that you trust them and you show them and tell them that you will help them to achieve their goals, then you see that the athletes understand that that also means something to you. And then you are in the process, and you're giving them some small goals that you can see that they can achieve, and then you give them some good feedback, positive feedback on that, and you're building stone by stone. Normally, I can see that I can handle that normally, but of course you have some situation and we have some athletes who sometimes need help from expert on that topic. It's where you don't believe in yourself, and if you have one bad training session, you think that the season is over and stuff like that. And I also try to put it into the perspective and always gives the kind of positive advice. So in many ways it's quite simple, but I see that if you show them that you trust them in the first way, it's something that I think is maybe the most powerful instrument.
You're listening to Arild Tveiten, Triathlon Norway's head coach, on the top 3 ingredients for endurance sporting success on this A Coach's Corner episode. If you missed last week's episode, it was an expert edition featuring UK-based running biomechanics, physiotherapist and PhD scholar Chris Bremer on all things biomechanics of the running athlete. When do we change running technique? Is it needed? What characteristics of running technique are linked to running injury? And so much more. Here's a little snippet of my conversation with Chris Bremer.
Okay, from a physical challenge, I want people to go out there and find 3 drills and practice those 3 drills prior to every single run and see how that starts to influence their performance. And in particular, ones that I would ask people to go and look for are your classics. See if we can get people to do the dribble series. So if you start searching around for ankle dribbles, let's see how we go with that. And then we'll go for a simple A skip. And let's see if you can do it, 2, how difficult you find it, and 3, how that impacts on your run.
It has been such a popular expert edition, Chris Bremer. If you happen to miss it, jump back with your pen and paper and get ready for the learnings. For now, let's jump back with the learnings from this week's Coach's Corner featuring Triathlon Norway's head coach, Arild Tveiten. Arild, when I say there's no recipes, I think your work embodies that you've got elite athletes, juniors, developmental athletes, and yet there's no recipes. You've got athletes who have swimming backgrounds who maybe are doing less running volume. Can you just speak to this, this concept of there's no recipes for a squad or a bunch of athletes? It's highly individualized.
Yeah. As you say, it is very individual, and but I've been working with some development athletes for many years, and many of you know that when I started working with Kristian Blummenfelt, he was 16, so I have quite big experience with working with development athletes, young athletes, and you see that in the beginning it's quite a big difference because they're coming from different sport, different background. What they can tolerate of training volume is quite individual. So I see that it takes many years to adapt them to be real triathletes. For instance, we have the youngest athletes we have on our team now is 16 years old, and they have another background than the others. So they need to, of course, work on the weak spot in discipline, but of course we need to take into big consideration the total training load, the risk of injuries. We see that a lot of swimmers especially have a lot of injury when start running a lot. But one way we have solved it is maybe a way that you can see some of those successes. That we see that one of the best and easiest thing to develop when they are young is the bike skills. You can have quite high volume on the bike with very little risk of injury. And then we also try to work on the training load on the swim. And then the running is very individual. And it's really big difference in how we can develop the running. So a very typical Norwegian athletes coming into the sport and the first year in the sport are normally very strong in the bike. And some of them are very good in swimming, but they are still in a development process. And they lack a little bit in running. So we see we never have any athletes who are performing well in we never have any athletes qualified in Youth Olympics because that's too early in our process. But when they are 19, 20, in the latest year as a junior, we can see that everything is coming together. And then they are suddenly almost a podium contender. One example of that is, for instance, Gustav Iden. He was a strong cyclist when he started doing triathlon, but he was really bad in swimming. His running was okay, but he was never able to show it because his swimming was so bad that he was last out of the water. And even if he was strong on the bike, he could never catch the main field on the bike because alone is quite difficult. And then he was too tired on the run, so he was not performing really well in the early days. But suddenly then the swimming was good enough, and then his bike skills were so good that the bike was just easy. And then he was almost rested when he started running. And then he was suddenly up there fighting for the medals in the junior worlds. It still lacked a little bit on the run in the end, but he was quite up there the last 2 years as a junior.
And who could forget Gustav riding the road bike to the victory in the 2019 70.3 World Triathlon Championships? Absolutely brilliant. Strength and conditioning, Arild, gym work or core work, what role does that play, and how do you structure that in amongst the high volume required across, in this case, swim, bike, run?
Here I should be a little bit careful. That is some point we should probably do more. Our best athletes, they normally do that with a strength and conditioning coach twice a week. And I do it maybe 1 or twice a week before the swim session, but not too much. We have been in a process with the Olympic Federation that they want our athletes to go into the gym and lift weights. We don't do that. We have tried to do that, but we haven't seen any more better result of doing it. But we're doing a lot of strength and condition training based on your body weight, and we have some really good coaches who's working to challenge the athletes on that. Where we are, it's just not strength, but also the coordination skills and working on different weaknesses on the athletes. It could be to work on strength and shoulder mobility for swimming, for instance. Working on the mobility on the hip to have a better extension on the hip, combined with special strength session on that. It's always included strength and coordination, balance, and stuff like that. So it's so I would say that the best athletes is doing that with a coach normally 2 times a week.
So there's that strength and conditioning element definitely in there.
Yeah.
And it's interesting spending time in February in Ethiopia, observing some of the habits and training practices of some of the best endurance runners on the planet. Many of them are not doing heavy high resistance training loads in terms of the gym work. They are doing body weight, lightweight, high rep work, which is contrary to a lot of the commonly preached practices. Certainly myself as a sports physiotherapist, where we're often trying to rehabilitate people through progressive strength work. And I think on reflection of that and mirroring what you just shared, Arild, there's at the elite level, I think there is a real resilience that's built up over the successive years of training, whereby recreational athletes may benefit from trying to, if you like, quickly gain some of that strength that they haven't built up over successive seasons of exposure to higher training loads. So I think there is a little bit of a difference in endurance sports of what age group, even competitive age group athletes might do in strength and conditioning and what the very elite do.
Yeah, I'm totally agree on that. And if I say myself, I'm turning 50 years this year. I know that I need to do more strength and conditioning training. So I will put much more emphasis on that for myself than I do with my athletes now. But when the athletes getting older, it will probably change a little bit. We had kind of an adaptation there.
Yeah, and as you say, your squad is so young, relatively. Every guest of the show, including this Coach's Corner episode, you're in the hot seat, distills everything that they've learned in their career into one piece of advice to help the listener of this show perform at their physical best. So what is Arild Tveiten's single piece of advice going to be?
Wow. Be patient. Take your time. If you want to have succeeded in an endurance sport, it's just not happening overnight. It's a long-time process, and be consistent in your training.
Be patient, take your time, be consistent in your training. And I think there is no elite endurance performer or anyone that maximizes their performance that doesn't get there through work in, year out, right?
Yeah. It's many years of training and development, and it's no shortcut in endurance sport.
No shortcuts in endurance sports. Absolutely beautiful. Arild, every guest issues listeners with a physical challenge for the week. So what is the head coach of Norwegian Triathlon? What's your physical challenge going to be to the listeners?
Yeah. I haven't thought about that, but one thing is, I think many athletes in many countries are not so used to it, is to be controlled in the training. So I would recommend I can't do an interval session, a quite long interval session you can do it on the track. And I would slow it down. So it could be that all age group could do it. You should try to do 8 times 1,000 meters. And you should be able to keep the pace all the time, and also go a little bit faster in the end. And when you are finished, you should feel you can do 2 more reps if you had to.
Beautiful. To the point where you feel like you could do another 2, but don't necessarily do another 2. That's a first for the Physical Performance Show, Arild. The first controlled interval physical challenge for the week. So tremendous stuff. Arild, if the listeners want to follow your journey moving ahead to Tokyo 2021, the Olympic Games, and everything that you're up to, where's the best place to do so?
You can follow me on Instagram. It's Arild T. That's my nickname. Also a little bit on Twitter. That's my name, Arild Tveiten. So, but I'm mostly on Instagram. So you can follow mostly the process of the team, from training camp, and a little bit of my own training. That's not so interesting, but maybe I have some beautiful pictures sometimes.
The scenery can be stunning. And Arild, thank you for your contribution to the Physical Performance Show. Certainly moving ahead, I think we all look forwards to seeing more Norwegian success. And thank you once again.
Oh, thank you, Brad. Thank you for hosting me. It was a really pleasure. And I hope it gives a little bit insight of how we try to do it in Norway, and especially in the triathlon sport in Norway.
Thank you, Arild.
Okay, you're welcome. Bye-bye.
So there you have it, another episode of the Physical Performance Show. And I trust and I know you enjoyed some of the learnings from Triathlon Norway's head coach, Arild Tveiten. And those top 3 ingredients are just so applicable no matter whether you are a beginner, recreationally competitive, or elite endurance sports athlete or athlete in general. Train a lot, pay attention to the intensity distribution, and recover well. Now, if you take on Arild's controlled interval challenge for the week, be sure to let him know. You'll find Arild, as he mentioned, easily available over on Twitter, on Instagram, at Arild T, ARILD. Speaking about Instagram, keep the podsies coming. They are a whole lot of fun. It's a screenshot of the episode you're enjoying and tagging in the show at Physical Performance Show. You'll find myself also easily available on Instagram at Brad_beer. If you have any feedback for the show outside of our annual feedback survey, then feel free to please reach out and let me know on social as well. Big thanks to those leaving ratings and reviews for the show over on iTunes, and also those hitting subscribe. Subscribing will ensure that the Physical Performance Show lands in your earbuds each and every week. Now, we're just 2 days away from the eagerly anticipated Dr. Stephen Seiler live stream event. If you are an endurance athlete and you are not already registered, then jump over to pogophysio.com.au/Dr. Seiler live stream. And for just $49, you will glean many learnings from one of the world's preeminent experts in all things endurance sports, physiology, Dr. Stephen Seiler. Yes, it's a live stream event, but all registrants also receive access to the event recordings and PDF copies of Dr. Seiler's notes. Be sure to register. Jump over, once again, pogophysio.com.au/Dr. Seiler live stream. Massive thanks, as always, to the great folk who make this show possible. Daryl Misson, our audio engineer, Susan Wilkin on all things show administration, Matthew Walding on all things show graphic design, and Lily Burden assisting behind the scenes with social media. Now, coming up on next week's episode of the Physical Performance Show, we explore a topic on an expert edition that is yet to be explored, and that is the role that our breath plays in optimal performance. I'll share a conversation with you that I had with one of my physiotherapy colleagues from university, James Fletcher of Fletcher Techniques, as we explore all things around physiology of our breath. Until next week, keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.